All right, welcome back in another episode of the Garnet Trust Hour. We got the pride of Lexington, South Carolina, Olivia Thompson in the house. Liv, this is episode 4, 3, 4, 4?
Yeah, 4.
How we doing? We good?
We're great. Oh, yeah. Gamecocks
from the Final Four.
Yep.
I know you're pumped. I know almost all of Columbia is pumped as well. NC State this weekend. What do you remember about the just excitement and vibes of going to the Final Four and just knowing, even obviously you want to win it once you get there, but that's such a special accomplishment to get there in the first place. South Carolina's been to 4 in a row now. That's an accomplishment in its own right. But what do you remember personally about going?
Gosh, I mean, the Final Four is just, everything's just coming full circle. Like you can taste it at that point. You can taste what you've been working for your whole entire season just right there. It's at your fingertips. I mean, I know I've talked about the bubble before, but it didn't necessarily feel like a Final Four to us because we had been in the same environment through every round of the tournament. But Minnesota, you could feel it, like stepping off the plane, even before you get there. Just like everyone has this energy about them, like it's right there. So I know they're feeling good about themselves.
Oh yeah, the girls are already out there. They're in Cleveland. I saw some photos on social media. Look like they're, in an awesome hotel. Great experience so far. And then at some point you kind of have to put all that aside, I'm sure, and dial into the task, to the business at hand. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let's kind of go back to this past weekend. First of all, in the Indiana game for South Carolina last Friday, that they kind of, it felt like they were in control. And then we have seen this team at times this year. There's been games where they have been in control, and you can see the other team kind of get some momentum. Felt like South Carolina got on their heels just a little bit. As a former player, did you start to get nervous a little bit as the distance kind of got smaller and smaller?
You know, it's funny because I didn't. I really didn't get nervous. My mom was. Me and my mom were watching the game together, and she was getting a little bit concerned. But when games start to get close, I always like zoom in on Coach Staley's demeanor. And she seemed pretty calm. So I was like, and she always does a good job of staying poised and staying calm. But you can tell when a coach is a little bit concerned. But she seemed calm. The team didn't seem too bothered, which I don't know if it is that concerning or not. But yeah, Indiana did cut it pretty close to the end. But I think in the grand scheme of things, that was good for us. It's good that we kind of had some uncertainty, a feeling of a team coming back, because it's like, oh, we don't want to feel that again. So I think at the end of the day, it's a good thing.
So you had some situations at the end where, to your point, it was like South Carolina has the ball and they need to execute. And if you execute in those moments, luckily it was like just enough of that pressure, but South Carolina wasn't down. It wasn't like you were down 2 and needed, a 2 to tie, 3 to win, like we saw at the end of the Tennessee game, the SEC tournament. It was more like you had the ball, you're up 4, you're up 5, execute, and you're leaving with a win. And I thought it was kind of poetic. Raven gets to hit the big shot, big 3. No hesitation from her whatsoever, and had to be a special moment for her. But what do you think that means for her as well if they're in one of those moments in these final 2 games?
That means so much for her confidence. Ravens put an emphasis on her three-point shooting this season after what happened last year in the Final Four, and just throughout her whole season, her three-point shooting ability has increased like astronomically. So her being able to just not even think about it, just catch and shoot like it's any other shot, that's major. That's very, very important for her and for the team, for players to have confidence in themselves, and for Camilla to have the confidence in Raven to knock that shot down. She was ready. She wasn't overthinking it. So that was very good for her, and I think that's going to carry over to the rest of these games.
And I thought a good, quick, decisive pass from Camilla as well. As much as this team has improved in terms of just having lots of shooters that can shoot the 3 ball, I still think it, you tell me if I'm wrong, but when the ball is going through Camilla and then she's kicking the ball back out, it seems like that's when we get our best looks, basically.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Getting Camilla post-touch, getting the defense to collapse and just kind of be back on their heels a little bit more lax, that gets the guards engaged, so we have time to kick it out, get your your feet set. Get your feet set, and knock down a good shot. So I think it's vital for Camilla to touch the ball every single possession, whether she shoots it or not, because she's an excellent passer.
We continue to see this depth be on display. It's like one game, it's somebody. Next game, it could be somebody else. You're definitely in survive and advance mode at this point. It's like Indiana, you can nitpick that it got closer, say, well, man, this should have happened. But you get to the next game, which is really, truly all that matters at this point. Oregon State presented a little bit of a different challenge as well. And this was a game where I thought it was good to see them kind of battle through South Carolina through some misses from outside, but then they kind of just kept firing. They stayed, I thought, a little bit more within their offense and were able to pull away a little. That one just felt more comfortable towards the end to me against Oregon State.
Yeah, and I mean, even Oregon State kind of was creeping back towards the end there, but the team was executing their offenses better. They had not necessarily an urgency, but they were more efficient on offense towards the end, and looking a little bit more intense and engaged in the game. So you like to see that, and I mean, all you can hope is that you improve throughout the rest of the games. I mean, you have no choice at this point. It's do or die now, and we're at the Final Four, and we know what we want, so we just got to handle business.
I'm looking at the box scores, another just like balanced effort, and I mean, Tessa Johnson. Like we talk about
Love
this,
Tessa.
we talk about this bench, and a lot of times I think when people think about the bench, they're thinking about Full Wiley naturally, and Kitts at times is coming off the bench. Sometimes she's starting. Watkins coming off the bench. Watkins, I mean, she only had 8 points. She had a huge day, 14 rebounds,
4 blocks.
Yeah, was just a menace.
Beast.
I feel like defensively. So arguably she could have been the player of the game in this game as well. But the bench comes up again. But Tessa, as a freshman, she gets overlooked sometimes, but she has such a beautiful shot, confidence about her, hitting free throws late, and it just kind of continues to me to point out just how much depth there truly is on this roster.
Oh yeah, Tessa's a beast. I love Tessa, and she's such a dangerous player, like you said, because for her 3-point shooting ability. But then when you close out, when you do a hard closeout on her, she has the ability to drive right back past you and go to the basket and finish. And I mean, if she doesn't finish, she's a great free throw shooter. So she's a very effective player for us, and her defense has just improved throughout the season very, very well. So we're a scary team to play. I mean, we're not a big team, but our depth is unmatched. So it'll be exciting to see.
I think we talked about Watkins a little bit last time, but she's definitely improved a ton from year one to year two. Just the confidence it seems like she plays with, the almost like a competitive edge she plays with now. I feel like she takes it personal that someone would dare try to score over her. I feel like there's like a menacing factor here or something when she's going up blocking shots. What did you think of her game on Sunday?
Yeah, Ashlyn's an intimidating player. Like she's got that look in her eye, but she's very tenacious, super competitive, and she absolutely has a chip on her shoulder. I remember I was watching the game. I think Holly said that after the Indiana game, Ashlyn went up to coach and was like, "I'm gonna do better next game. Like I promise you, I'm gonna look to score more," and she did. She was super effective on the boards, looked to get her shot, and I mean, she cleans up those rebounds. It's unreal. But her, like you said before, her defensive ability is out the roof. It's amazing.
Yeah, the athleticism off the charts. We've seen her dunk in games. Did she bust out the dunk in practice a lot as a freshman or not a ton?
She actually did. It would probably be like a twice a week occurrence that she would either attempt a dunk or make a dunk.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's something she practices for sure. It's not just something she just whips out during a game. So I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more opportunities for her to do that. I think next year, the way Molly gets us right in the weight room and the way she practices, I think she could have 2 dunks next year for sure, at least.
I'm glad you brought that up. So is it Body by Benetti? Is that
Yep.
that's the slogan, the phrase there? Is that a program that anybody can
Yeah.
get involved with now too? Is that right?
Yeah, that's her brand, that's her business. So she started that this year. So yeah, anyone can get a Body by Benetti training package.
Are you
So
still subscribed?
I'm
Oh
so sorry, Molly.
man, you're gonna get a text. But
I know. I actually watched the game with her last night. I went over to her house and watched the LSU game.
we're all right, and we're gonna get to that on the other side here in a second. But what has she meant to South Carolina women's basketball in general as somebody who played was trained by her as a student athlete here?
Oh, Molly's amazing. Molly's as good as it gets in basketball. She's so brilliant, so smart. She takes the time and puts in the effort to get to know every single player personally, but also understand their bodies and their needs. So she's able to curate workouts specific to players. She's always trying to learn and grow. And I mean, you see that. I mean, our team is in tip-top shape. And I mean, it starts with her. But it's also the team's willingness to want to get better in those areas. So yeah, she's amazing. I can't say enough good things about Molly.
All right, like we said, we're going to talk some LSU and Iowa. We're going to talk about Southern Cal and UConn. We're here with Olivia Thompson in studio. Garnet Trust Hour. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Segment 2. We're here with Olivia Thompson, and we talked South Carolina in the first segment. Let's talk about some of those other games. That was an exciting night for women's basketball in general. I mean, in UConn, Southern Cal, that kind of got overshadowed a little bit. Ended up being a good game in its own right. You had superstars in that game too. But how much in general do you think the game has just grown since you were young and kind of getting into basketball versus playing, and now just kind of seeing the amount of attention there? I feel like there's more and more superstars within women's basketball that draw attention. But I mean, LSU, Iowa with Caitlin Clark and the personalities you have at LSU. I mean, I'm curious to see what the ratings were on that one, because there had to be millions tuning in.
That's what I was saying yesterday. I was curious if the ratings yesterday were higher than they were during the national championship game last year. And I mean, that's just amazing to see how much the game has evolved in just like the past 3 years. Like it's just took off. And I remember I was looking at Twitter like throughout this week, and people were talking about the NBA games on Monday, and people were like, nobody cares. Caitlin Clark and LSU and Iowa were playing, and all this is like, it's amazing to see. And even when players are receiving criticism, it makes you feel a little bit good that people are engaging in these games. Because I mean, everyone's going to get criticized, but the amount of engagement that you're seeing in women's basketball I'm very happy to see it.
Yeah, no, I think like anything, there's got to be a line, right?
Yeah,
like there's a line between getting completely personal versus, I mean, some players kind of, they have personalities where they're going to ask for it to an extent. Like I'm not saying that people should be getting threats, personal threats or anything like that. But at the same time, and I think some of that stuff is actually not from the fans, but just seeing personalities on the court is very good for growing the game.
Absolutely.
And from a storyline standpoint, having Caitlin Clark in Iowa against Angel Reese and LSU, defending champ against Player of the Year, LSU beat them last year. That's a TV network's dream right there. Yeah. And for the most part, it lived up. I was wanting the final few minutes for it to still be a little bit tighter. But, I mean, this thing was a racetrack, like back and forth for most of the game. You got 40-plus from Clark. You got, big-time players making plays. Did you think Iowa was going to win, or were you a little bit shocked? When
Caitlin started to get really hot in like the second quarter, I was like, it's over. It's over. Because when you have a player that can not only shoot the three with that much accuracy and efficiency, but also create for her teammates, and her teammates can shoot threes as well. I mean, it's hard to beat. And LSU was just off shooting last night. It wasn't really falling for them. And Angel tweaked her ankle again. So it's just things weren't really clicking for LSU. And it hurt me because that's kind of what happened to us last year. It just we weren't on, and Iowa was. So that's what happens when a 3-point shooting team is on. It doesn't matter how well you score, as long as they're scoring threes. It's hard. It's hard to win that game.
You were definitely a 3-point shooter as well. Caitlin Clark, I want you to take everybody as much as you can into what you kind of her mind almost, because I feel like there are things I don't really quite understand how she's so accurate, because I feel like you hear people talk about balance and setting your hips and kind of getting balance before you shoot a basketball. I feel like she's like fading to the left, or I don't know if her wrists are just like, is she adjusting in the air every time to like the distance and I'm fading to, like, I feel like if you were to hand somebody a basketball and teach them how to shoot 3-pointers, you would not teach them to do it the way she does it, but she gets away with it, obviously.
Yeah, that takes years and years and years of practice and muscle memory. And I mean, she practices that way. I mean, I remember like seeing clips of her in high school, and she's doing the same stuff. She just works on it, and it's very polished and fine tuned what she's doing. And I'm sure in her workouts, she practices shooting it from the volleyball line and someone running out at her, people yelling at her. I mean, you gotta practice the way you're being played in games. And I mean, she's super smart. and she wants to be great. So I'm sure that's how she's working out. But I mean, she's just a different breed. Like she's crazy. They said the stat where her average distance from three that she shoots from is 26 feet, and the line is 22. Like that's crazy. Shooting 4 feet behind the basket, like 4 feet behind the basket every time is crazy.
Yeah, on average, which it's like it's not just a thing that happens every now and then. Like,
right.
It's consistent.
Yes.
And how much do you think, from a defensive standpoint, that I mean, at the end of the day, this is like math and physics. Like, if you have to the more space you have to guard someone, the more room that's going to open up. So the fact that she can consistently hit from out there, and then if you come out and try to guard her way out there, if she gets by you, you're kind of cooked. And then if you bring somebody, you got help defense over, and she can pass the basketball too. How much does her range just make it nearly, at times when she's hitting, it makes it kind of almost impossible to hold her down? Oh,
it makes it so hard because you have to pick her up 94 feet. You have to bother her as much as you can. And you guarding her that far out just opens up the court so much, and her vision is so incredible. Mm-hmm. Even if you take a step back and she doesn't drill a three in your face, she's going to find someone. She's going to find the open player. And she's very good at reading ball screen action. Great at creating for herself and others, and that's very problematic for defenses. So I'm intrigued to see how UConn will handle this, because I know they take a lot of pride in their on-ball defense. Yeah, that's going to be another fun matchup. So UConn beats Southern Cal the late game on Monday night, and hey, the Paige Becker's revenge tour. Like, I remember when she was coming out of high school, and everybody was talking about her, #1 player according to ESPN. She's dealt with the injury. She's kind of reinvented a little bit of who she is as a player. What did you think just watching her? And she's had a great tournament start to finish so far. Yeah, Paige really impresses me. Caitlin and Paige's games are quite different. I would say Paige plays with more of a slower pace than Caitlin does. She's more like methodical with the way she approaches offense. But she's a problem. Like, she is definitely a problem. Both of them are great at creating for themselves and their teammates. She's very good at coming off of screens. Just smart, very smart player. And she was very good defensively last night. Definitely helped UConn UConn out with that win. She has some timely steals. Good rebounder. So they're just two very complete players with similar games in a lot of aspects. So that would be an interesting matchup to see. Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I feel like, UConn, they've kind of had to adjust, honestly. Like, I feel like we're used to seeing them have depth, and their injuries have kind of eaten away at their depth. And now Paige is, like, technically, I think she's a 4, but she's also playing point guard when they have the ball. It's like they've kind of had to adjust on the fly, it seems like. And they're only mainly playing their 5 starters with a few subs here and there. So it's just kind of different than, obviously, a South Carolina style where you've got 9 or 10 girls that are rotating in. Right. No, it's amazing what UConn has been able to accomplish with the amount of injuries that they've suffered this season. But they're just extremely driven. They're very well coached. The players that are playing are very determined. And, at this point, why not go as far as you can? They're very skilled on defense. I know Gino doesn't want to lose. So it'll be very exciting to see, but it's definitely a different style. And Iowa's depth is kind of limited as well. So I think that's a good matchup. I think this is a very even matchup. And I think with part of me wonders with Iowa, are you almost just like, all right, if Caitlin Clark goes for 40, you know she's going to get hers. Part of the difference was her supporting cast. Yes. I think he had 21 points and 15 from other girls. So to me, like, if Caitlin just tries to do everything, but nobody else does anything, maybe we'd rather that. Yeah, maybe that's your victory. Yeah, I honestly think that was what LSU was trying to get done last night. But 21 and 15 plus 40 from Caitlin, it's hard to stop that. So as long as the players who had those higher scoring games are at a minimum and Caitlin does whatever, I think you'll be okay. And I definitely think UConn has an advantage in the post. So it'll be interesting.
It'll be very interesting. All right, let's keep it right there. When we come back, we're going to talk South Carolina, NC State. Big matchup on Friday night, ESPN. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in segment 3. Olivia Thompson hanging out here, Garnet Trust Hour, talking South Carolina women's basketball, upcoming Final Four, getting everybody ready for that. Been a fun tournament so far. South Carolina, NC State. This bracket, as far as the Final Four, has kind of got everything, Liv. You got obviously a couple of 1 seeds. You got NC State, which I would say is the team just kind of flying under the radar right now, but has been very hot. And then, of course, UConn. You're not used to them playing spoiler or being the 3 seed, but here they are. What do you know, what do you recognize so far about this NC State team and what South Carolina's going to need to be kind of prepared for this weekend?
They like to play fast. Their game goes through their guards a lot. They have a strong post presence in River, but Isaiah James has been going off in these past 2 games. So her confidence is definitely high. And I know Sanaya Rivers has a little bit of a vendetta against South Carolina here, so she's going to want to go off as well. But I say they have a similar style of play to South Carolina. They want to get out and go in transition. They're feisty on defense. So, yeah, this is a team we haven't seen in a while. But the last time we played them I was going to say the last time that we played them, we lost. But then we went up there and played them at their place and beat them.
Yeah, didn't South Carolina beat them there, but they beat South Carolina here the year before?
Yes.
Is that right? And that would be the last time South Carolina has lost at Colonial Life Arena.
Yes,
pretty sure.
Was to NC State. And, I mean, it's a completely different team now.
Yeah.
But still, again, a very well-coached team, a very determined team when you're a lower seed. And, I mean, they were slept on from the beginning of their season, so they just have a huge chip on their shoulder. So I know they want to make something happen. But well-balanced team, so it'll be exciting to see this game as well.
What do you think, and you talked about it for a second there, but what do you think of the Sanaya Rivers factor in terms of she's going to know, obviously, a lot of the South Carolina players. A lot of the South Carolina players are going to be very familiar with her. Former teammate. It's got to be a little bit different. I mean, we see this in the transfer portal era these days, but still, it is an interesting storyline. And she's been playing, like, they've been letting her handle the ball, I feel like, a lot more. Like, she's kind of become more of a point guard at times for them. But what do you think? Like, will there be – well, does that add something to this, or you think both sides are going to try to, like, minimize that? How does this play out?
It definitely adds something to it, the fact that she used to play here. But I think this late in this season with this much riding on this game, you got to put your emotions and your personal wants on the back burner a little bit, because it's about winning. It's about winning games. It's about moving on to the next one. So for her, because I love Sanaya, I hope she plays smart. I feel like she will. She has a good team around her. She has, I mean, like I said, Isaiah James, Mimi Collins has been doing well. Madison Hayes, I mean, she's a lethal 3-point shooter when she's on. Zoe Brooks, a freshman, I mean, she's a dog, like, straight up. So I think everyone is very balanced. Everyone's equally matched between our team and NC State. So it'll be exciting to see. But, yeah, I hope Sanaya Rivers just keeps her head a little bit during this game.
And, I mean, I would warn Gamecock fans, like, don't get caught up in that 3 beside NC State's name, because they've earned their way here. I mean, Texas, that's a good basketball team that they beat. And Isaiah James went for 27 in that. I mean, she's got that lefty shot that's a little bit different to kind of defend, I think. And so this will be a tough game, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think if South Carolina, which we'll probably say this for any game, if South Carolina executes and plays to their potential, they'll win. But I don't think this is going to be a game where you can just show up and have an off game and expect to win. Like this, you can tell as we get later and later in this thing, like it gets tighter and tighter in terms of the overall quality of opponents. So this will probably be another fourth quarter game, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is not a team you should sleep on at all. And I mean, just judging from our past 2 games, it's time to have a consistent 4-quarter game. It's time to bring it every single quarter. And now's the time to do it. You have to do it. It's do or die now. So it's a good matchup. NC State's coming for us. I mean, we still have that target on our back to the most extent. But yeah, it'll be very interesting again. I'm excited to see it.
Keys to a Gamecock win. What you got?
Keys to a Gamecock win.
Yeah, keys to victory for South Carolina. Anything that stands out specifically?
Transition defense, boxing out and rebounding, knocking down threes, guarding the 3-point line, getting the ball to Camilla, whether she scores or not.
I think Fulwiley needs to have a good day. These final
and
two.
Pow Pow.
Yeah, like I feel like Fulwiley, the last couple of games, she's kind of been feeling her way through a little bit. We saw what she did early in the tournament and at the end of the SEC tournament. I feel like at some point they may just turn her loose, and if she can get hot, then I feel like this is a different team when she's really going, and it makes them even tougher to beat. On the other side, obviously, we'll find out Iowa or UConn. Hopefully, one of those will be playing, hopefully, South Carolina in the championship. Who you got? Caitlin Clark or Paige Beckers?
I want UConn to come out on top. It's very hard for me to say right now, but part of me thinks that Iowa's going to win. But I want, for Paige and just what she's been through, I want it for her to win it.
It's going to be a fun game, too. Yeah. It's going to be awesome. We won't talk to you before the title game.
Right.
So hopefully it's Gamecocks versus whoever, really, at that point. Who really cares as long as you get there? Regardless of opponent, whether it's UConn and Paige and those girls, or it's Caitlin Clark, but ESPN wants the Iowa South Carolina
100%
rematch.
100%.
That would be so fun, though. It
really would. It really
would be great for basketball too.
Yes.
What would you be looking for in terms of matchups? Trying to slow down Caitlin Clark this time compared to last year. They're not going to be able to pack everybody in.
Right.
Like they tried to last year.
Yeah.
It would be a way different matchup than last year if this happens. So what are your thoughts if it happens?
It absolutely would be a different matchup for them. I want Raven to guard Caitlin. But see, I think any of them, I would like to see Malaysia on Caitlin, Breezy on her. I think they could all give her hell. Ooh, sorry. Give her heck a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely going to have to play us on the 3-point line, which gives us ability to drive and kick, drive and hit Camilla, and we definitely have that post advantage throughout our depth. So it's exciting. I mean, it's hard to say right now, but it definitely will be different than last year in many different ways, and we're going to have that big chip on our shoulder.
Are you nervous? Do you get nervous watching the games?
I was so nervous during the LSU game in the regular season when we played them at their place, but since then, not really. Yeah, but right now I'm feeling like a little bit nervous.
Just thinking about it.
Just thinking about it. I mean, we're right there, and I mean the pressure always gets a little bit harder when we're this close.
I got a weird thought. I feel like South Carolina wins Friday and like doesn't get caught up in all the hoopla. And I feel like NC State just doesn't quite, as good as a team as they are, they don't quite have like the hype coming in as the other teams that have been kind of your favorites, you would say. I think if Carolina gets to the championship, I don't
it's
think
over
Carolina's
for whoever it is.
I think that's it. I think the key, do not overlook NC State. And then you roll into, like you said, that chip on your shoulder against Caitlin Clark with just a chance to get some revenge there. Ultimately, you got to execute. But I think they could be cutting down the nets. Are you predicting the Gamecocks to cut down the nets?
Oh, yeah.
All day?
All day.
Heart and head?
Yes.
All the way?
All the way.
All right, Liv, I think that's it. I think we're out of time. Enjoyed this as always. Do we have one more with you after the season?
I would hope so.
We'll just make it happen.
Yeah,
okay, if you're in, I'm in.
All right, sweet.
All right, she's Olivia Thompson. As always, has been a Garnet Trust Hour interview. Head on over to garnettrust.com. You can support South Carolina student athletes. For Liv, I'm Wes. We'll see y'all soon.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head here, wrapping up today's edition of the show. Appreciate Olivia Thompson for hanging out, giving us a little bit more insight as the Gamecocks get set for another Final Four, a place that she was obviously very familiar with in her tenure here at South Carolina, going to multiple editions of the Final Four, including last year's, unfortunately, where South Carolina did come up a little bit short, but great insight into not only Iowa and the perspective of going up against Caitlin Clark, but also NC State, a team that Liv Thompson does have experience playing against a couple years ago, where they were the last team to come into Colonial Life Arena and beat South Carolina. So should be a great matchup coming up tomorrow night. Again, tip-off is at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 6:30 right here on The Game, where hopefully South Carolina can continue their undefeated streak and move on to play the national championship game on Sunday against either UConn or Iowa. So we'll see how that see how that ends up going. One thing that stuck out, to me in that conversation with Liv, she mentioned the three-point shooting ability of a team like NC State. And that's something that when you look at South Carolina this season, again, undefeated up to this point, they've beaten everybody in their path. But when you have a team that can shoot the three ball effectively against them, I don't want to say it's an equalizer, but it's something that can certainly keep them in the game. I go to the other night when they played against Indiana in the Sweet 16. Guess what? They shot 13 three-pointers in that game, and it ended up being a very tight game at the end of it. And not that South Carolina can't defend that. That's just something they haven't had teams do as prevalently against them this season. And obviously, if you go up against Caitlin Clark on Sunday in the national championship game, guess what's going to happen? She's going to shoot a lot of threes. So again, that's something that bit South Carolina last year and cost them a shot at the national championship, and something they're going to have to defend very well this upcoming weekend as well. Hello, Wes.
Liv was good.
She was good. That was
She
great.
was great. Man, I tell you, so Caitlin Clark is obviously, she's great, but she's also kind of polarizing, and people feel different ways about her, right? But you could just tell from someone who has been on the other side. And,
Oh, yeah.
And Olivia got in the game last year against
on the court with her.
Yeah, against Iowa. The level of respect that she has for her ability and just I wanted to, especially as someone, and people maybe forget because of all the talent that Olivia played around at South Carolina. In high school, Olivia was a scorer. Yep. And she was a three-point shooter in high school and was had a phenomenal career at Lexington High School. Well, so just hearing her talk about Caitlin Clark, you could tell there's a respect level for her ability and what she does on the court.
Well, you don't have to like Caitlin Clark. You don't have to like Iowa, but I think everybody has to respect what she does because she's legitimately going to, and, we can have the GOAT debate all day long about the greatest women's college basketball player of all time, definitively being a number one, but she's at least in the conversation, and her legacy of whatever it's going to be at the next level of women's basketball will add to that to some degree. But, man, watching her, whether you like her or not, is exciting, and I was locked in and couldn't believe some of the threes that she was making the other night. It doesn't seem real almost because she's pulling them up from 30 feet out.
Yeah, and I wanted to get Olivia's take on just her style because she does look, Caitlin Clark looks off balance a lot of times when she's shooting threes, and it's so much of what she does is sort of her almost adjusting in midair, like her wrists, her accuracy. It's incredible because a lot of times, people like that are great shooters, you're talking about like muscle memory, and it's kind of getting your feet set and getting into that same positioning each time. And you'll see great three-point shooters that kind of have their favorite spots, right? And she does too. She has her spots she gets to that are almost landmarks on the court, I feel like. But how many times does she get to her landmark where she's sort of fading one way or another? And I would be curious to see, how do you defend Caitlin Clark? And we're, by the way, we won't have a show after Friday before Sunday, right?
So if they win on Friday night, Elijah and I will have a pre-show on Sunday leading you into pregame coverage. So we will have an opportunity to talk about them if they win on Friday.
Okay, well, I was going to use that as my excuse to go ahead and talk about the potential of Iowa.
That'll be me and Elijah. So if you want to take the floor on that, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so point being, if you get into it analytically, I wonder, are there some kind of keys to defending her? And because she loves that kind of fade to the left, 3-point shot, and she seems to love driving to her right. So are there some, if you really kind of, if you had somebody do a deep dive into her game and her tendencies, would that play in? And also, I wonder, the teams that have beaten them this year, because they have been, I was not undefeated, obviously. So
Sure.
I wonder what the keys were to those particular games. I imagine a lot of times it does, like Olivia and I were talking about, comes down at times to can you limit her teammates?
Mm-hmm.
If she scores 40 but nobody else scores anything, you're going to win the game.
Sure.
Also, how much do you make her work for her 35 to 45 type points? Does she have to shoot a ton of shots, or does she have an efficient night? I think making her inefficient, easier said than done, but I think that's the key.
So Indiana, who Carolina played in the Sweet 16, did beat Iowa the second time they played them earlier on this year. I think Caitlin Clark was 8 of 29 on her shots in that game. So, yeah, she still scored a lot of points, but she had to really work for them. Similarly to like when the men's team played Tennessee the first time and Dalton Connett scored his points, but it took him 30-some-odd shots to get there. So, yeah, it's about making her just shoot as much as possible and limiting her efficiency to some degree. But again, taking those players around her away to limit that damage of what they can do with the other four on the court.
Yeah, and I think what does UConn have planned for her? If it gets to it, if we get what I think most people want to see, I know I want to see South Carolina, Iowa. I really
do too.
I want to see the rematch.
You want to beat the best player.
There'd be so many great storylines. It'd be great for the game. It'd be great for South Carolina to have a shot at revenge on her.
Sure.
You can then do to her what Iowa did to South Carolina seniors the year before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you love wrestling, Tyler. This is how, if WWE was scripting this,
sure,
this is how it would go. So we'll see if we get that. But I can't help but think NC State just rolling on it. I've heard people say, well, South Carolina's not getting talked about enough. No, NC State is not getting talked about enough.
NC State isn't getting as much recognition on their own campus because the men's team is also in the Final Four. DJ Burns has captured America's hearts. Like, they're flying under the radar in Raleigh, for crying out loud. So, yeah, they've got a chip on their shoulder. They're looking at South Carolina being the top dog, saying, and look, this is an NC State team that has played significantly better in the NCAA tournament, saying, we can take this team down.
Yes, and they're built like I think a lot of these teams in the tournament, other than South Carolina, their team kind of revolves around 2 or 3 players.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas South Carolina, it's much more of it's a kind of a 9-person rotation. And so it's built a lot differently for Carolina than some of these other schools. But for NC State, their difference makers are playing so well that they've been able to ride that to where they are right now.
We'll dive more into that coming up next in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, including another trophy for Dawn Staley to add to her already impressive trophy room. That's coming up. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs next here on the game.
As you know, coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover, presented as always by our friends at Firehouse Subs. They've been the presenting sponsor for every single episode. This one, no different. Go out and support them. It's almost lunchtime. Hit firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. By far, those are the 2 easiest ways to order because you can hit that rapid rescue to go. Avoid the wait. Order online. They're going to have it sitting in a bag for you with the chips right there on the shelf when you walk in. Want to try something new? How about the new Barbecue Cuban? It is Southern Roots with a Cuban twist. That's their brand new limited time offer sub that you can get right now. Or try one of your favorites. Of course, the Hook and Ladder is an all-time favorite. My personal all-time favorite, brisket add bacon. The bacon kind of puts it over the top. That's also our buddy Larry's favorite as well, I believe right now. We'll check on that next time we see him. Order Firehouse subs right now, and huge shout out to them for supporting Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
Welcome in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mosher, and Chris Clark along with you here on this Thursday, one day out from the Final Four. Women's team in action, taking on NC State up there in Cleveland. Going to be talking to our guy, Elijah Campbell, a little bit later on in the hour as he'll be our correspondent on the ground, though he's currently stuck in the Chicago O'Hare Airport for a couple of hours. So we'll help him kill some time coming up at 11:30, getting set for tomorrow night's Final Four. In the meantime, Dawn Staley and company already up there in Cleveland. She took home some additional hardware yesterday. The Naismith Coach of the Year Award for the third time in a row, fourth in the last 5 years. I mean, that trophy shelf has just got to be absurdly huge for her at this point, right?
Yes. Elena Valter yesterday also has a big from Gamecock softball.
By the way, softball went into extras again last night as she predicted.
And
won.
And I look out there because so I wasn't able to watch, and so I was catching up via social media on Gamecock softball's account. And I'm like, let me see what's going on here. So I'm going through, and I'm like, yep, there's Alina pitching. Supposed to be her day off, I think.
Well, when you go,
She's
how many
in there.
innings did they go? I saw they were in 10.
Yeah, I don't even know how many.
So
She was in there again.
she was in there at some point.
Probably be back there, right back at it this week as well. So, yeah, but I mean, back to Dawn, just I think this all of the trophies that she's gotten have been well deserved. Every time that she's won the Coach of the Year award has been well deserved. But man, like you look at this year, this is special work even for her. And I think you go back to the fact that they lost so many pieces off of that team, not just from a production standpoint. You can look at the percentages of, scoring that they lost. You can look at the fact that they lost the freshies class and they lost basically their starters, all of them from that team, and has taken a team that, yes, still extremely talented, but a group that was still, I think, young, I think not mature yet, and you've just seen the growth throughout the year and what they've done, where even if the end of the road is literally just the Final Four, that's still an incredible coaching job. And if they do more, it's just icing on the cake, cherry on top, however you want to classify it, and would just illustrate even more what a great job she's done.
I think it's very reminiscent of what we talk about with Dan Hurley with UConn on the men's side of things, where they obviously won the national championship a season ago, lost just about all their key players, to the NBA draft, and then they're right back in the mix once again, the favorite going into this weekend doing the national championship. So I know people can maybe roll their eyes when, the best program and the best coach wins it once again, but when you really break it down, yes, very impressive what Dawn Staley's been able to do, because not that we thought the team was going to be bad or suddenly be at risk of getting bounced in the first round or something like that. But we didn't know if they were national championship caliber good. And here they sit trying to accomplish the goal once again that they had set out to do last year, be undefeated and be national champions.
Yeah, UConn men are the favorite if they can actually make it out there.
I was going to say, they might have to drive.
Yeah, the biggest potential upset is that they don't make it and have to forfeit at this point. That's the only chance anybody has. But, yeah, Dawn obviously has been fantastic. We'd have to ask Chris Wellbaum, and we'll do that tomorrow. Maybe you go back to some of her earlier teams at South Carolina, but certainly in recent memory, this may be her best coaching job in terms of just putting the pieces together. And, she's talked about it. She didn't know quite what to expect for this team. So I don't know how the rest of us could be expected to know. I mean, that's one of their sports. They're unknowns and they're variables. And I would argue just about every single player that needed to take a step forward for this team to be as successful as they have been did just that. Like they all have improved so much year over year. And that's not normal. Like usually, some people get better, some people don't. Maybe some people buy in, some people don't. And for the most part, all these girls have just balled in. They've worked very hard, clearly by the results that we've seen, not just as a team on the court, but individually, sort of every single one of them's development to this point. And so I think that speaks to coaching. I think that speaks to culture. I think that speaks to the coaching staff as well. They've had to make changes, not just with their team, but going out and hiring a new assistant coach as well. So I think it was a year of transition off the court, obviously. But, talk about just reloading. This is the very definition of it.
Did y'all see, by the way, the clip? And I don't have the context. It must have been before or after the awards ceremony. But did you see Dawn Staley talking to Cameron Brink, that video that's going around? Cameron Brink from Stanford.
Yep. And
Dawn made a plea for her to just take her name out of the WNBA draft and come on to South Carolina.
Could you imagine?
The funny thing is if that actually happened, it's not going to happen, by the way. The funny thing is if that happened, the NCAA would be like, you tampered, which is ridiculous.
I was going to say, is anything even tampering anymore?
That would be incredible, though. You just slide in Cameron Brink on next year's team.
Go ahead and pencil them in for the Final Four once again.
I mean, you can probably do that anyway
Sure.
at this rate. But yeah, Cameron Brink will be quite an addition. It was a funny moment though.
Yeah, no, very cool. And again, just continues to add to the already laundry list of accomplishments that Dawn Staley's had. And, win 2 more games this weekend, and you add another national championship and the ability to say you're one of the few in the history of women's college basketball that's been able to do it as an undefeated team, which, again, was the goal a season ago with the freshie class. And, unfortunately, ran into Caitlin Clark in the Final Four, and, things went sideways. But, the ability, as Wes and I were talking about at the end of the last segment, the classic WWE-style revenge match potentially on Sunday if both teams can get through Friday night.
I am so here for it. But I think the focus of the fans is obviously a little bit already on that possibility, but you got to think that that's not going to be the case in that locker room for South Carolina. Like, I don't think you're at the Final Four. You're not looking past anybody. I think that's a storyline, obviously. Like, that's something for us to talk about and say, they can't look past NC State. But nobody in that locker room cares about Iowa at this point until you've finished your business. And I think it even maybe helps a little bit that South Carolina has the early game. Like, I would much rather play as opposed to sit around and watch that other team and wait and wait and wait and wait. And it's at 9 o'clock or 9:30, depending on when the first game ends, tip off. To me, that would be the most miserable part of the whole thing, is just waiting around all day. They'd be like, oh, hey, watch your 2 potential opponents play as well. I think it's great to just go ahead and play this thing. And I think the first 2 neutral site rounds were actually probably going to be very beneficial for South Carolina as well, because this young team, they do play much better, as most teams do, but I would say it's a little bit exaggerated. They've played much better at CLA than they have in neutral site situations. So to be in some tight games, to have to execute, to be in a spot where if you make mistakes down the stretch that you can lose the game and go home, I think those, in some ways, because you won, it maybe has been more beneficial than just beating a team by 20 points.
Yeah, they've had those teaching moments, and it wouldn't have been the end of the world, by the way, if during the regular season this team had dropped a game or 2, because all their goals still would have been in front of them, as opposed to you lose that game in the SEC tournament against Tennessee in the semis, one of your goals is out the window. If you want to go, you had won the conference, but you want to go. You want to win your conference. You want to win the conference tournament. You want to get to the Final Four and go try to win a national title. Like, the goals, because of what Dawn Staley's built, are really that lofty. It doesn't mean it's a failure if you don't check off 1, 2, or even all 3 of those boxes. But she's created that standard for the program to where you can legitimately look at it before a season and go, these things are all in view. They're all attainable, and they all could and should be goals. Losing a game or 2 during the regular season wouldn't have knocked any of those out. Typically, when a team loses a game and you're as good as South Carolina women's basketball is, you look at it and go, okay, this is a learning experience. But they've kind of been able to have both of those things. They've been able to win all their games, have a chance to make history, but have those teachable moments along the way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's good that you have those and still able to hold on to the win and hold on to being undefeated up to this point. And the way, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the way that, Indiana was able to stay in that game was shooting from the outside. They nailed 13 three-pointers in that game last week. That's something that South Carolina had not seen a ton of this season. So that's something to learn from, especially when you look at a team like NC State that's shooting the ball really well from the outside in their past couple of games. Obviously, if you take on Iowa, that's their whole offense pretty much with Caitlin Clark. So it's the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, we're not as good in defending this. How do we get better? Because we know if these other teams are going to stand a chance against us, that's exactly the game plan they're going to implement.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think, again, NC State is so reliant on their superstars making plays. As if you needed another sort of storyline to be added in the transfer portal era. You have a former player of South Carolina playing for NC State and starring for them at this point as well.
I did think it was interesting what Liv had to say in the last hour, that there seems to be some bad blood. Well, what was the exit of her like from South Carolina a couple years ago?
Yeah, I don't know if it's bad blood, but I think and I don't think it's personal with this game, but I do think there's some added maybe advantage to for one, your competitors. So you almost want to beat up on the person that you know just as much as somebody you maybe dislike, Also, I think talk about having a scouting report. I mean, you practiced with her every single day. So you don't think Dawn Staley knows the tendencies of Sanaya Rivers? I mean, this is a situation where South Carolina will have her scouted completely. And I'll be curious to see, does she press or does this lock her in? We had that discussion about Kusnard on the men's side, and I thought he was going to score 5 or 50, and it was closer to 50. I don't think Rivers will go for 50, but I think it'll be an intriguing storyline that is another layer in this matchup.
Yeah, and of course they've got more than Rivers. Their entire team really, especially what is it, Isaiah? Can't come up with their last name. James. There you go. Thank you, Isaiah James.
No relation to LeBron.
She's their best player.
Yes, she is. I mean, she's in what, number 2 or on the power rankings? Three that ESPN
Page
released.
2.
Yeah, Paige Becker's 2, Caitlin Clark 1. And so Isaiah James is playing great basketball. Their entire team really is, as is their men's team. They've hit their stride here at the end. So it's not, just about Rivers. That will capture a lot of the attention going in. Certainly, she's a critical part of this team. But gonna be interesting to see. I agree how she performs, because there is. I mean, to be honest, there's probably a little bit of added pressure for her playing against the team that she left.
And again, we're going to be talking to our guy Elijah Campbell coming up at 11:30 out there in Cleveland, or at least en route to Cleveland, for his thoughts on this matchup coming up tomorrow. And that's all sponsored by Forest Lake Travel, Columbia Craft, and CHW Cabinetry. We'll shift gears to college football coming up next, because the potential future of college football was outlined yesterday in an article by The Athletic. We'll dive into that coming up. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, as you get ready for all the action that's going to be taking place in sports this weekend that we've spent the first 15 minutes or so talking about here on the GC Takeover Hour, want to turn your attention to our friends over at Integrated Media. Michael, Nathan, and their entire team can come to your home or your business and make sure you have the best possible audio-visual setup. Whether you're enjoying sports action and you want a great AV setup, TVs, Sonos wireless speakers, a sound bar, all that good stuff, they can do it for you. They can source the equipment for you so you don't have to go to the big box stores. You can use a local vendor right here in the Midlands. They can also install it for you. They've been to my home. They've been to West Mitchell's home. They can come to yours too. Whether you need that or you need something like security and cameras or a complete smart home system where you can control all your lights, your devices, your sound, all that stuff, your thermostat, from the touch of a button. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. Our guy Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass. An interesting article came out yesterday on The Athletic. And, you know, we talk a lot about the ever-changing landscape of college football, and we've, you know, talked about this thought of a super league coming at some point down the road. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. Well, there's a group of people that are pretty significant in the sports world, got some presidents and chancellors, various universities, people within the NFL and NBA team owners, a lot of like prominent figures in the sports world that have an idea for what college football can look like. They call themselves College Sports Tomorrow. And to say the least, this is a radical overhaul of college football as we know it.
College Sports Tomorrow.
Tomorrow never comes, if you really think about it.
It's good. That's getting existential here, but I'm going to let our resident NIL expert, Chris Clark, weigh in on this one first.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this. You know, something that's said a lot that's accurate is that college sports are becoming more professionalized, and there's no doubt that that is the case, and it will remain the case. And so, I mean, the question is kind of how much. There are going to be problems with anything that's put into place. Like any single measure, any complete overhaul, if we stay in the current structure and overhaul it, there's always going to be something that you're able to point to where you go, that doesn't really make sense, or that doesn't match, or that part's bad. And I think part of it is just nature of the beast. When you're mixing athletes who are literally in college and you kind of combine that with the professional and increasingly professionalized aspects, there are going to be problems. They're going to be weird. It's not fully, there's not like a full synergy there, as opposed to it's completely amateur or it's completely professional. We're not in a place where you have that anymore. We're not going back. Forget that. We say that often. But this proposal is very interesting because, you know, you've basically got this drastically new system. It would totally replace the NCAA. Mm-hmm. It would totally replace the college football playoff. And, you know, it does try to provide a solution for a lot of the different problems that have been created by the merger of college sports and the increasing professionalization. You know, NIL, transfer portal, the NCAA facing a zillion lawsuits. That part's not sustainable, obviously. So the question is just, you know, what does that look like? And then would that model even work? And what do members, you know, what do schools that are currently in the NCAA think about it?
And it would change the structure of how you do scheduling. It would basically take the 130 some odd teams, I think there's 134 now, that we know as Division I FBS, basically split them into two tiers. So you have the 70 some odd teams that we know as Power 5 schools right now that would be split into 7 team divisions. And then you have an additional 8th division at this Tier 1 that is comprised of the best 10 teams from Tier 2 in a promotion relegation type of system that European soccer uses. Now, the 70 teams from Power 5 would never be at risk of falling back down, but you have the ability to continually refresh and bring in the best teams from the second level to give them their fair shot, their opportunity to play for, I don't even know if we call it the national championship at that point, because, again, this is a complete overhaul. Whatever the championship ends up being, no committee, no college football playoff. It's structured like the NFL. You win your division or you become a wild card and you make it in the playoff that way, seeded, you know, based on win-loss record and all that kind of stuff. So it is very much professionalizing college football in addition to creating the ability for unions, creating some kind of, you know, a commissioner or central authority figure that can kind of guide the entire thing that every other major sport has. How we get there, easier said than done, though.
Yeah, I do appreciate that it seems like at least tried to think a lot of these things through. Like it's easy for any of us to be like, this system doesn't work. And then you see all these kind of half-baked ideas that are thrown out there. And then it's like, well, what about this? And then the what about this is some massive elephant in the room that kind of blows up the entire thing. I think, glad you brought that part up, Tyler, that the teams in Power 5 right now would not be in danger. So I think everybody look at what has happened as the Pac-12 has dissolved, and you have two teams that just kind of looked around and didn't realize everybody else had left the room, and they got kind of left hanging. Well, that's every athletic director and every athletic department's worst nightmare, is to kind of get left behind and miss the boat in terms of where college football is going. And so this includes everybody that's in the Power Five, which I think is a huge aspect, because that's a great way to start to gather some favor within all the people who would have a say in this, and that's all the schools, basically. I think the biggest roadblock, and this is mentioned in the article, is what are the specifics on all those conference contracts with the TV networks that have been negotiated down to a T and involve not millions, billions of dollars.
Yes.
That's the biggest roadblock. Now, is there a way that if you can convince, I mean, ESPN and Fox are the players here, if you can convince them, hey, this is even better for you, then obviously that's going to be a big part of this. And I think that my other question is, where exactly, and this, maybe I haven't gotten there yet in the article, Chris, where exactly is all the money coming from with the direct deals with the players?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know, Tyler. Do you know the answer to where the proposal for where the revenue sharing from?
Yeah, so
TV agreements.
That wasn't specifically outlined. I imagine they're assuming.
It's a big.
That's
a problem.
That's a big part of it. I imagine they're assuming that ESPN would form some kind of contract with them for this new playoff or whatever these new leagues would end up being called. But I thought it was interesting that they pointed out. So this group has met with the ACC back in February, gave them their proposal and all of that. None of the other power conferences want to meet with them or haven't scheduled meetings with them up to this point, with the fear of upsetting ESPN, who just signed a $7.8 billion contract with the new college football playoff running through 2031. They don't want to upset the apple cart by any degree there. And here's the thing. If you want to completely revolutionize college football with this new model, but you don't have the biggest players like the SEC and the Big Ten who are collaborating now, remember that, you're not going to have it. Like, it's not going to happen.
And how much money, and this came up in that piece, that I think an unnamed executive had this opinion. I mean, how much more money can you squeeze out? Now, we could be wrong. I mean, maybe the next deal's for like $1 trillion. Who knows? But, at some point, is ESPN going to say, all right, enough's enough? I mean, maybe. So you do have to solve the issue of where's the money coming from for athletes. It might come direct from schools in some instances, and then also revenue sharing. I think the other part is, one thing that was pointed out, the revenue distributions would not be even. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're a school like South Carolina. Right now you're in the SEC. Your revenue distribution, which in 2023 was $721.8 million per Greg Sankey, that was divided among all the member schools.
Yep.
Pretty good setup. You go to this model, a school like South Carolina, obviously you want to be included in this. You don't want to be left out on the periphery.
Sure.
And most people in their models are mocking up have them in. But Alabama, Notre Dame, these brand name schools, they're getting a bigger cut, which would irritate some schools and might cause some hesitation. As it should. So that's another problem. Again, there's going to be problems in any model.
And there's a trickle down from that, because we, again, don't know the money situation for players becoming employees. So if you say, okay, well, Alabama's going to be making X amount millions more dollars than South Carolina is, well, guess what? The Alabama players are going to get paid more. So if I'm being recruited, similar to what we're running in with NIL, if I know I can make more at Alabama or Oklahoma or something like that, guess what? I'm probably going to try and go there as opposed to these other schools, which, again, continues to create this rift and this disparity between the top and the middle and the bottom of college football.
So I'm continuing to read here. Universities would own a percentage of the league, a model derived from MLS. Unlike the soccer league, the revenue distribution would not be an even split, as y'all just said. Now, they do believe that there would be added value to these TV contracts, and that now that everybody is negotiating as one, it would be kind of like the NFL, where you could pick perfect viewer windows, perfect networks. There would be just everybody would be able to operate on the same page, as opposed to right now you have the SEC and ESPN/ABC operating their own interest, Big Ten, Fox, they're operating their own interests. So there's actually a lot more to unpack here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a conversation that we can continue to have. There's certainly a lot of details in that. But coming up, we got to talk to our guy, Elijah Campbell, who is going to be out there covering the Final Four for us this weekend out in Cleveland, currently holding over in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. So we'll help him kill some time coming up. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. Getting set for tomorrow's Final Four action. South Carolina taking on NC State. You'll be able to listen to that right here at 7 o'clock on the game with their pregame coverage starting at 6:30 as they look to claim another national championship this weekend up in Cleveland. It's time to talk to our guy who is going to be on the scene up there in Cleveland this weekend, taking it all in. Elijah Campbell, hit that sounder, Ed.
Elijah Campbell.
Can we get this when we walk in? Huh? Wes Mitchell, like when you walk in.
Elijah, I know you are not currently in Cleveland at the moment. How are you choosing to kill your time at the Chicago O'Hare Airport?
Right now, I have just taken a seat in the food court here at the first available place I can plug my phone up into. And am currently scouting out the places where I want to get my food from. And, you know, we're leaning towards a deep dish pizza type of lunch today. But the options are bountiful at this airport. It's a big old building.
I heard if you go to Chicago and don't eat the deep dish, they throw you in jail. So that's probably a wise choice.
That's right. Yeah, I've done a good job of avoiding jail my whole life, and you know I don't want to do that in Chicago. So I think I'm definitely leaning it. And I'm a big Chicago deep dish pizza fan. I didn't think I would like that, but I went to Chicago 2 winters ago, and I had it from different places. Fell in love with it. It's a very unique pizza eating experience.
Well, when you do get to leave Chicago, you'll go to Cleveland, where South Carolina is taking on NC State coming up tomorrow night. And, you know, the conversation all week long so far has revolved a lot around, obviously, Caitlin Clark, UConn, South Carolina being the undefeated, lone team left, chasing another national championship. Nobody's talking about NC State. But this team, when you look at what they've done in the NCAA tournament, they've improved their scoring, they've gotten better from three, and they've taken down some pretty darn good competition in Stanford and Texas in their last 2 games. Like, this team is very capable of giving South Carolina a good game tomorrow night.
Oh, it 1,000% is. And if you look at this NC State team, too, they have the experience that's going to be needed to win a game like this. Their entire starting 5 is juniors and seniors. The entire starting 5 averages double digits in scoring. And you have a go-to scorer in Isaiah James, who, while only shooting, about an average 34% from 3 during the regular season, has absolutely kicked it up a notch in the 4 games leading to the Final Four. She made 16 of her 28 in this tournament, which is good for about 57% from 3. So she's dangerous, and Texas learned that the hard way when she hit 7 of 9 and also was able to score on backdoor cuts and using the gravity of the threat to shoot a 3 to be able to use it in her advantage. And NC State's not one to sleep on. I know that I can be guilty at times when looking at the women's Final Four and mentally picturing, okay, is it going to be UConn versus South Carolina or Iowa versus South Carolina? But the game on Friday before Iowa-UConn is going to be probably better than people think. And it's an 11.5-point spread right now, but I would not be surprised for this to be about a 2 or 3 possession game with a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, Elijah, appreciate you doing this, man. And you can kind of – I feel like the deeper and deeper in the tournament that you get, the tighter the games get. And obviously, if you're NC State, you don't want this run to end now. And I think they're playing with a great amount of confidence. So you're going to get their best shot if you're South Carolina. What do you think the keys are for South Carolina just from a matchup standpoint in this game? Because, I mean, you look at this Gamecock team all year long, they can throw so many different things at you that it kind of depends game to game and matchup to matchup what direction they're going to take. What approach do you think South Carolina will take to NC State?
I think the biggest key, really, when you look at the matchup with how NC State plays defense, South Carolina's got to be able to knock down threes with some regularity. Because if you go back and look at the Texas game, NC State made it a point to make sure that the Texas bigs wouldn't feed them. And Texas shot below 40% from 2 in that game because every time Madison Booker put the ball on the floor, she was seeing multiple bodies. Anytime they were trying to run isolated post-up, they would front the post and then have somebody sagging behind on the help side to be able to maybe try to steal the lob pass over or to be able to be in position for a quick double afterwards. And it caused turnovers. It caused uncomfortable looks for Texas, no matter how close into the paint they got. And I think if you're South Carolina, Camilla, I don't think he's going to have a problem catching the ball in the low post. She's going to have to be able to keep it, keep it off the ground and being able to use her kick out, which she's done really well this year in terms of her passing ability. If she's able to find the wing shooters, South Carolina has got to be able to knock those down because we want to talk about the shots that are going to be there. I think catch and shoot threes are going to be there. The Gamecocks didn't shoot very well against Oregon State, won despite shooting 4 of 20 from the three-point line. The second half of the Indiana game, anybody but Raven Johnson was missing three-pointers. Raven hit the clutch three at the end, but it was kind of a struggle for a while. The shots are going to be there from the perimeter. This is going to have to be, I feel like, a game that Tahina Pau hits a few, Malaysia hits a few, Raven hits a few, because they're going to have open looks on the perimeter. Because I think NC State, more than likely, if they play South Carolina the way they played Texas, they're going to really sell out to make sure Camilla doesn't put up like a 20-15 game on them.
Elijah, two-parter for you here. Number one, looking over NC State coach Wes Moore's comments, he actually mentioned that he thought that this was the best team that South Carolina has ever had. Now, keep in mind what Dawn Staley has done in Columbia. Pretty lofty praise.
Might be some Lou Holtz in that, though.
Lou Holtz, but it's not Lou Holtz saying, we can't beat William and Mary. It's, this is an undefeated team. But, yeah, high praise there. So, number one, thoughts on that. Number two, talk to us a little bit to go to the other team, NC State. I think they had 5 players in double figures in their last game. So, just the versatility that they'll bring from a scoring standpoint as well.
Yeah, I don't think Wes Moore's too far off because, like, when you look at this version of the South Carolina Gamecocks, they provide multiple – there's not really a lot of things that you would say, oh, that's their Achilles heel. The only thing you can, I think, really point to is that they can turn the ball over and get a little sloppy sometimes, and they do get ahead of themselves. I mean, I point to the first quarter in the Texas A&M game in the SEC tournament a lot as one of the low points of this team in terms of their execution, 10 first-quarter turnovers. And averaging a turnover per minute isn't exactly, your idea of great offense. And, when Georgia threw a matchup at them, it confused them for a half, but they made the adjustments and they were able to light them up in the second. But this team is so deep. I mean, there's not a team in women's college basketball or maybe even men's college basketball that pulls off 5 players off the bench that are as talented as South Carolina has and has the firepower to be able to score. I mean, NC State, like as you mentioned, this is one of the coolest stats about NC State is their entire starting 5, averages double figures. Well, if every single player for South Carolina was able to get, starter minutes, they'd be in the exact same, position, right? You look at their per 40-minute numbers, everybody on the South Carolina team is able to score, and you can play about 9 or 10 deep with players that would be able to start at for anybody else in the country. So I think that's really what separates this team from other teams that Dawn has had. And the fact that you have a dominant low post scorer, you have elite three-point shooters on the perimeter, headlined by the best in the country in Tahina Pau, and you have somebody like Ashlyn Watkins, who I would say, Camilla won Defensive Player of the Year nationally, and I don't think that's some type of mistake, but I think, pound for pound, it might be Ashlyn Watkins with their ability to get steals and blocks and be the best defensive rebounder in the country. I think having all those elements makes this the best South Carolina team I've seen Dawn put out on the floor. And for NC State, too, with that balance, I think what makes them tough is not just that they have 5 players who have the ability to put up 10-plus in a game, but they're able to match up with you in different ways. Like River Baldwin gets about 7 rebounds a game, too. She's 6'5". That will be an adequate matchup with Camila Cardoso. You have, certain players out on the forwards that can play as wings. Mimi Collins will play out in the perimeter a little bit at 6'3". She's averaging almost 11 points a game. They have versatility with the size and the amount of matchups they can be able to throw 2 teams while also being able to put someone like Zoe Brooks, who's a highly touted freshman, off the bench. She's scoring almost 10 points a game herself. But you have a lot of versatility there with different players that can score and where they score from, which I think could be pretty challenging.
All right, Elijah, we're going to check in with you more over the course of the next couple of days leading up to this matchup tomorrow night. Appreciate your time. Want to give you a chance to shout out the great partners that are allowing you to be up there in Cleveland this weekend.
That's right, absolutely. I gave a little shout out to Columbia Craft Brewing Company this morning on the early game, and I want to focus this one on CHW Cabinetry. You hear a lot about them from our pal Jen Jensen in the morning, so they're one of our fine sponsors that are sending me to the Final Four. And from passion, inspiration to installation, call 803-520-6837. Big shout out to them for helping fund this trip over to one of the best sporting events on the calendar.
All right, enjoy the deep dish pizza, and we'll check in with you a little bit later on in the day.
That's right. Hopefully I will not be asleep after this deep dish pizza cleanse.
There's a very good chance, but you can sleep on the plane later, I guess.
That's right. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Elijah Campbell again on the way to Cleveland, set to cover the Final Four this weekend. You can also check in on his coverage on our social media handles on 107.5 The Game's Twitter and Instagram. That's all going to be sponsored by Modern Exterminating over the course of the weekend. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, a former Gamecock with a parting shot at his former team. We'll get into that coming up. It's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes wrapping up today's edition of the show. Reminder coming up tonight at 6 o'clock. Carolina Calls with Coach Kingston after a not-so-great baseball game last night where they fell to Georgia Southern 8-0. They locked their sights on Texas A&M, another number 3 team in the country, coming in this weekend for a series out at Founders Park, and we'll dive into some of that coming up tomorrow. I wanted to hit this before we get out of here, though. Juice Wells was on the Locked on Ole Miss podcast, I believe yesterday, and had some interesting comments when asked the question of why he decided to leave South Carolina.
I wanted to be with a quarterback who's actually experienced in the SEC and can actually, control the offense. And also, I want to win, man. I don't like losing. I'm a competitor.
Well, if he's looking for a warm reception when he returns in October, he's not doing a very good job of garnering that.
Whew. Yeah, no. Not the best way to say it. I mean, I'm not going to join the mob on this one.
Okay.
I've interviewed Juice many times. I truly don't think he meant it the way it comes across. I don't think that's a shot at Lenora Sellers. It's definitely not a shot at Spencer. Everybody knew Spencer was not going to be back this year.
Mm-hmm.
What was it necessarily well put? Probably not. But do I get why Gamecock fans are piling on at this point? Yes. It's still raw. It's kind of, this was not a great breakup in the first place. And so in no way am I saying you can't feel a certain way. If you're a Gamecock fan, I certainly get why you feel that way. I think he was just asked a question and he gave some thoughts.
Yeah, I think, it's important context with you having talked to him a bunch of times. I mean, we had him in here at one point on the Garnet Trust Hour a while back too. And, throwing in, it's almost like a semantic word. Like you throw in the word actually, it's like, oh, okay, well, because Lenore Sellers is not experienced in the SEC. He played in a handful of games last year, right? So you've got that, and you've also got the other part of the comment that says, I want to win, I'm a competitor, and Gamecock fans have the background of knowing that maybe you could have helped the team, right? Or maybe you could have played. And so there's a lot in here. Like Wes said, kind of a bad breakup probably on both sides.
Sure.
And what I don't want to do is I don't want to be, because I always complain about this, people who take a clip, put it online, and then have a violently felt opinion without other context. And so what I mean by that is, yes, he said those comments. I'm kind of curious, what else did he say? I know that the rest of the interview, the full interview, will be coming out at 7 Eastern time tonight, I believe.
Yes.
And so, let's see what's said. Now, was that a good way to put it? No. Was he trying to jab a dagger in Gamecock fans or Lenora Sellers or Shane Beamer? I don't think so, but I also don't think it was well put.
He has responded, too.
He has responded. He put on Twitter, on X this morning, whatever they're calling it, Sellers knows it's all love. Y'all calm down, basically. And so, yeah.
To put it in context, and again, if he would have had time to thoroughly plan out this answer, I think he would have answered it a lot differently. Jackson Dart, an experienced quarterback in the SEC, is who's going to be throwing him the ball this year. Is it crazy to say that Jackson Dart is a better quarterback than Lenore Sellers right now? It's not. So that part makes sense. Ole Miss, based on what we saw of them last season, what they've retooled with in the transfer portal and the guys they have coming back, they're set up to have a really good season this year. They're very likely could be in the college football playoff. So, again, I get what he's trying to say. I don't think he answered it in the best possible way. And, again, without the full context of it, we don't fully know, but people were rightly riled up about it last night.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I mean, PR standpoint, lesson learned, you got to, right there, and I don't think, I'm with you, Wes. I don't think he meant it like it came across, but it appears a certain way.
Yeah. People are throwing stuff at the radio for me saying it like that, and that's fine. I get it. But
And you know what?
Again, they can feel that way.
And
That's fine.
And you know what? The rest of the interview, he may be trashing South Carolina the whole time, and we'll have a different thought on that tomorrow.
Yeah,
But
that's
based on
right.
the
I'm
12
told-
based on the 12 seconds that we've seen so far.
I'm told, sources say, nothing else negative, like nothing negative in the interview. He talks a little bit about some of his other experience, some big games he had, things like that. So
Sure.
we'll see what comes out. I think that's important, to be able to see that. But yeah, not a good, not the best look.
Well,
For sure, we can agree on that.
The court of public opinion was quick to jump on that one, but we'll see what the full context is, and that is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. If you want to check that out whenever that comes out tonight at 7 o'clock. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tomorrow, going to be out at Charwood Golf Club, hanging out all morning long. We're going to talk plenty about the Final Four. Going to hear from Dawn Staley. She'll be speaking to the media today, as well as Wes Moore from NC State, and get you set for that matchup coming up tomorrow night. Halftime show with myself and Terry Ford coming up next, right here on The Game.